The breeze wrapped around you like a sigh, warm and slow, carrying with it the scent of old paper, lavender, and quiet rain. You were no longer indoors, but in a vast open meadow under a silver sky. The grass beneath your feet swayed as though it breathed, and the air hummed with a low, calming tone, not music exactly, but the sound of something that had been resting peacefully for a very long time. In the distance, you saw small hills rolling gently like ocean waves frozen mid-motion, each crowned with delicate structures, a teacup-shaped observatory, a tower made of umbrellas, a tree with windows glowing softly along its trunk. You wandered forward without intention, following the way the wind leaned. The meadow didn't resist your steps, it welcomed them. Flowers opened as you passed, releasing little clouds of glowing mist that sparkled briefly and then disappeared. One landed on your shoulder like a snowflake and whispered a story into your ear, not in words, but in warmth. At the top of a nearby hill stood a small gazebo made of pale glass, its roof catching the sky and bending it gently downward, so it looked like you were stepping into a folded piece of heaven. Inside, cushions and blankets had been arranged in a wide circle, already warmed. A kettle sat beside a cup that was already full, though no one had poured it. You sat, and the cup lifted itself to your lips. The tea tasted like memory and moonlight, soothing, delicate, and utterly familiar. As you sipped, a soft chime echoed in the distance, and the sky above you shifted slightly, becoming streaked with lavender and rose. Stars began to appear, one by one, but they blinked not in patterns, only in rhythm with your breath. Around the gazebo, the meadow folded inward, becoming more intimate, like a room being gently closed. Fireflies drifted upward, tiny glowing notes rising from the earth's lullaby. Somewhere deep within the folds of the land, you heard the quiet turning of pages. You lay down among the cushions, and the sky above you began to ripple like a calm sea. Images moved across it, soft and slow. A rain-drenched porch where someone waited. A bedroom window left open for the breeze. A single candle flickering beside a bowl of fruit. Moments of peace from lifetimes you weren't sure you'd lived. You felt yourself become lighter, not in body, but in thought, as if the heaviness of forgotten things was gently being set down, one by one. The gazebo began to dissolve around you, not fading but becoming part of the air. The cushions melted into clouds. The tea evaporated into scent. You stood, or maybe floated, as the world around you opened like a book reaching its final page. You could feel the library again, behind and around and inside you, not as a place, but as a presence. Its quiet heartbeat, its slow pulse of remembering and releasing, was now part of your own breath. You began to walk again, though there was no clear path. Only the invitation of movement. Your feet met steps made of wind. Your hands brushed against leaves made of light. And somewhere in the distance, the whisper of rain began again, slow, silver, and kind. As you followed it, you passed through a field where the droplets hovered in the air, glowing faintly with the soft blue of early sleep. Each one chimed as you passed, like a tiny bell tuned to your deepest calm. The field narrowed into a hallway, not made of walls, but of tall stalks of glowing grass. The sky above darkened into a comforting dusk, and stars grew brighter, each one a story someone had whispered to the library and then forgotten, left to shimmer in peace. At the end of the hallway was a soft arch, framed in branches that curled like sleepy hands. You stepped through, and on the other side was the room you began in, the one with the drifting shelves, the floating lanterns, and the smell of rain and books. But something had changed. It felt smaller now, not because it was less, but because you had grown. Not in size. In stillness. In softness. In understanding. The lanterns above you dimmed slightly, shifting to a deeper golden hue, like the last light before night folds into sleep. The shelves no longer stretched forever. They curled inward now, wrapping around you in a gentle embrace, as though the library itself was tucking you in. Books still whispered softly to one another, pages rustling with distant rain sounds, but now their voices were quieter, more hushed, as if they too were preparing to rest. You moved through the space slowly, almost floating, your steps matching the slow rhythm of your breath. Every aisle you passed gave off a warm sigh, the way a home does when someone returns to it. You reached the desk again, the one with the steaming cup and the pen that never quite stopped writing. The cup was still warm. The pen paused for just a moment as you approached, then continued, this time writing your name, followed by a symbol you didn't recognize but felt like truth. You watched as the ink bled gently into the page, then faded into the fibers like water into cloth. The librarian returned, or perhaps had always been nearby, simply quiet. His coat of mist swirled with soft light, and his presence made the room feel steadier somehow. He regarded you with a kindness that didn't need words. In his hands, he held a small bundle, a book bound in velvet and tied with silver thread, no title on its spine, only the shape of a droplet pressed gently into its cover. He placed it on the desk in front of you and nodded. It pulsed faintly under your fingers, warm and slow. As you opened it, the pages filled not with writing, but with the soft glow of memory, pages that shimmered and unfolded into places you remembered only when you didn't try to. A walk beside a quiet canal under glowing paper lanterns. A nap beneath a dreaming tree. The hush of snowfall outside a train window while you held a warm drink and watched the world blur by. This book was yours, and had always been waiting. The librarian touched the edge of the desk with one long finger, and a doorway opened behind him, not a door, but a parting in the shelves, a space made of invitation. It pulsed with that same silver-blue light of the rain jars, beckoning. You held the book close and stepped through. On the other side was a room without walls, only curtains of drifting mist, soft and slow. Beneath your feet, the floor felt like memory. Familiar, comforting, full of things that no longer needed to be held tightly. In the center was a bed, wide and low, wrapped in layers of cloud-colored blankets and velvet. A single lantern floated above it, glowing softly, pulsing in time with the beat of rest. You lay down, and the book settled itself beside you. The air curled close, folding around your body like a lullaby, cool where you needed cool, warm where you needed warmth. The lantern above began to dim, just a little. Just enough. You felt your breath deepen, your muscles soften, your thoughts grow quiet and slow. And just before you drifted fully into sleep, you heard it, the gentle sound of rain, falling not on rooftops or leaves or glass, but falling gently inside you. A remembering rain. A peaceful rain. One that whispered, "You are home. You are safe. You are allowed to rest." And so you did. The rain that fell within you was soft and silver, not wet but weightless, drifting like breath through the quiet corridors of your thoughts. You lay still, body slack with peace, while the library curled gently around you, not like a building anymore, but like a sky. A vast sky filled with pages, memories, clouds, and echoes of moments that had always been kind, even the ones that once felt lost. Somewhere far above, the lantern dimmed further, its glow dissolving into starlight that rained down in threads, stitching dreams together. You turned slowly, eyes half closed, and found the bed now floating in a pool of air, rocking gently as though held in a cradle made of dusk. Below, the layers of the library shimmered like reflections in deep water, the jarred chamber, the feather room, the soundless garden, the hallway of feeling. You saw them all not as separate rooms, but as pieces of one great heart beating softly in the stillness of timeless remembering. And then you noticed something else. Small lights were appearing across the mist below you, tiny, flickering stars rising from shelves and corners, each one a sleeper. Others, like you, were resting somewhere within this place, gently dreaming their own quiet stories, each tended to by soft rainfall and memory. You weren't alone. You had never been alone. The bed drifted onward, slow and sure, passing under arches woven of lullabies and drifting between constellations that rearranged themselves into soft, wordless symbols. The book beside you glowed faintly. Without needing to open it, you knew it now contained your journey, not as a tale told, but as a feeling kept. Your first step through the driftwood door. The jars filled with echoes. The feather that whispered your kindness back to you. The ribbon tied around a forgotten part of your heart. It was all there, humming quietly, safe in its softness. The bed floated toward the edge of something vast, and just as you reached it, you found yourself standing, not abruptly, but naturally, as though your body had already known it was time. Before you was a shoreline made not of sand but of pages, and the waves that brushed against it were formed from gentle mist and ink. The air here smelled like night rain and blooming jasmine. Ahead, a boat waited, shaped like a curled leaf, with a sail spun from woven breath. No oars, no engine, just trust. You stepped into it and sat, and it began to drift, not across water, but across thought. Behind you, the Library of Lost Rain stood quiet and luminous, its towers stretching into sky, its windows glowing with the light of countless remembered things. You could feel it watching, not as a watcher, but as a guardian, cradling all that had been forgotten gently in its endless arms. The rain continued, slow and rhythmic, falling into the boat and vanishing into warmth. It didn't dampen or disturb. It only comforted, like the soft voice of someone who knows the way. You closed your eyes. And in the final moments before sleep took you fully, you felt yourself dissolving, not vanishing, but becoming mist, memory, and peace. You were no longer just within the library. You were part of it now. A whisper in the hush. A ripple in the stillness. A story added to the rain. And the rain went on falling, softly, endlessly, forever. The rain had no sound when it fell in that place, only a soft hush like a sigh pressed gently into the folds of silence. It drifted rather than dropped, floating in pale ribbons of mist that shimmered faintly as if laced with memory. You didn't arrive at the library of lost rain by path or map, not really. You simply found yourself there, quite naturally, as though you had always known where it was. It stood at the edge of a nowhere forest, half forgotten, wrapped in ivy that glistened with dew that never dried. The sky above it was neither day nor night, just a soft silver hue like moonlight filtered through warm linen. You stepped closer and noticed that the building was much larger than it first appeared. Endless wings and towers extended like thoughts into the distance, their shapes blurred by the ever-falling mist. The door, carved from dark driftwood, opened at your touch, not with a creak but with a breath, like someone gently waking from sleep. Inside, the scent of petrichor and old paper swirled in the stillness. The floor was soft underfoot, not quite carpet and not quite moss, something in between, like walking on pages that had long since forgotten their words. Lanterns floated without chains above the shelves, glowing with the dim, amber warmth of memory. There was no one at the front desk, though a steaming cup of tea sat beside a pen that slowly wrote on its own, copying a passage in looping, elegant handwriting that vanished as soon as it was finished. You wandered, slowly, as one does in dreams, down aisles that seemed to twist and turn without end. The shelves weren't just filled with books, but also jars of rain. Each was labeled with a name, a date, and a place. Some were as small as teardrops, others were as wide as bowls. When you listened closely, you could hear the sound of those moments, faintly echoing from within, laughter in the rain, arguments at bus stops, kisses beneath umbrellas, and solitary walks beneath weeping skies. An old librarian emerged without footsteps, his coat woven from mist and his glasses reflecting 1,000 unread pages. He didn't speak, only smiled, and handed you a small slip of paper with your name written on it in ink that seemed to shift and ripple like water. "Follow the paper," he said, though his lips never moved. The slip drifted from your hand like a feather caught in a breeze, gently winding its way between shelves and staircases that spiraled both up and down at once. You followed, past rooms filled with soft thunderstorms trapped in globes, and others where clouds hovered just above the floor, raining quietly into bowls of stone. Time behaved differently there. Minutes stretched like honey and hours curled up like cats. You forgot what you were looking for, or whether you had ever been looking for something at all. All that mattered was the peace of the place, the slow, unhurried breath of the library around you. At one point, you passed a room where an entire storm was being composed by a quiet figure at a piano. Every note summoned a droplet into existence, and the room darkened with clouds that spun slowly overhead. You sat on the floor and listened, eyes half-lidded, as the melody drifted into your chest like warm water. When the piece ended, the storm folded into a silver book and disappeared. The slip of paper fluttered again, nudging you onward. You passed beneath arches that whispered your name like lullabies and beside mirrors that didn't reflect your body but your past dreams, glowing faintly in soft blues and greens. Some dreams you remembered. Others you didn't. One showed you riding a train made of petals. Another revealed a garden that sang lullabies to the stars. You didn't feel startled, only comforted, as if rediscovering pieces of yourself that had simply been set aside for a while. The paper led you to a room with a single window, though there hadn't been any windows in the building before. Through it, you saw rain falling upward, drifting from puddles into clouds. A chair waited for you, soft and deep, and beside it a book without a title. You sat, and the book opened itself. Inside were not words, but droplets. Each shimmered with memory. As you turned the pages, you watched entire evenings unfold, some you lived, some you had only imagined, and some you could not quite place. They were all gentle. They were all yours. The book turned its own pages slowly, unhurried as breath, as though it knew you needed time to feel each droplet. One page revealed a walk you once took beneath a plum-colored umbrella, the air thick with the scent of wisteria and warm pavement. Another showed a street you had never visited, lit by golden lanterns swaying gently as a soft drizzle made halos around their light. In that vision, your hands held a letter you had not yet written, but you somehow knew exactly what it said. A quiet presence entered the room then. Not a person, not quite a shadow, but something like the echo of someone who had once read the same book. It settled into the corner like mist curling along the floor and hummed a tune you recognized from a dream you couldn't place. The window shimmered again, and outside, the clouds began to form shapes, not just animals or faces, but entire cities that rose and melted away in seconds, born from the sky's own sleepy thoughts. The slip of paper fluttered once more and drifted out the door, waiting. You followed. Hallways gave way to corridors of shifting seasons. One corridor was lined with frost-glazed books that exhaled little puffs of snow as you passed. Another smelled like early summer and had low-hanging shelves full of vines and blossoms that leaned in gently as if listening. Somewhere in the distance, soft rain began to fall again, not from the ceiling, but from within the shelves themselves. It fell in slow motion, hovering in the air like pearls suspended by unseen threads. You reached out and touched one. It whispered a lullaby in a voice you almost remembered, and then vanished. The librarian reappeared, his form slightly more faded than before, as if he were becoming part of the mist around you. He extended a hand and in it was a key made of glass. It pulsed faintly with an inner glow, and as you held it, you felt something unlock deep within your chest. Not a door, exactly, but a room inside you that had long been closed. He gestured toward a small arched doorway that hadn't been there before. Its frame was covered in raindrop-shaped runes that flickered when you looked directly at them. You stepped through. On the other side was a round chamber with a domed ceiling painted like a stormy sky, clouds swirling ever so slowly overhead. At the center stood a globe filled with rain, suspended in mid-air, turning softly with no visible mechanism. As it turned, it cast shimmering patterns across the walls, and each shimmer sparked a memory, some yours, some belonging to strangers whose names you almost knew. You stood in silence for a long time, simply breathing, allowing yourself to be cradled by the hush that filled the room. A long bench shaped like a crescent moon appeared behind you, cushioned in velvet the color of midnight. You sat, and the globe began to whisper. It didn't speak in words, but in the sensation of rain on your skin, the warmth of holding a cup in both hands, the comfort of woolen blankets, and the taste of tea sipped alone while watching fog curl outside your window. It told you that this was not a library for reading but for remembering. For letting go. For holding gently the things you once forgot. You looked at your hands, and the key of glass had melted into a small droplet resting on your palm. You closed your fingers around it. A hush passed through the chamber like a yawn, slow and stretching. Lights dimmed not with darkness but with sleep. The globe pulsed one last time, then stilled. You rose and stepped back through the arched doorway, which faded into mist behind you. The librarian waited beside a spiral staircase that coiled downward into a soft glow. He didn't speak, only nodded, and you began to descend. The staircase wound downward like a ribbon through mist, its steps padded in velvet silence. Each one gave a soft sigh as you stepped, as though it exhaled a breath it had been holding just for you. The walls beside you shimmered with drifting images, not fixed memories, but moments in motion. You saw raindrops sliding down glass, a candle flickering beside a window, a child watching the sky with open hands. The further you descended, the quieter it became, until even the sound of your own breath felt like part of the hush. The glow at the bottom of the stairs opened into a circular room with no ceiling, only the wide, open sky above, pale and endless, full of slow-turning clouds. In the center of the space sat a pool, still and shallow, its surface made entirely of stilled rainfall, frozen in motion like a painting. You walked to the edge and knelt, peering into it. Reflected there was not your face, but a version of yourself made of mist, gently pulsing with soft light. That version looked peaceful, not asleep, but resting, like the moment just before a dream begins. A soft voice, neither male nor female, neither young nor old, spoke behind you. You may leave something here, if you wish. You turned, but there was no one. Only the feeling that someone had once been there and still lingered in kindness. You opened your hand and found, cradled in your palm, the droplet of glass the key had become. Without thinking, you let it fall into the pool. It touched the surface without sound and vanished, sending slow ripples through the suspended rain. The reflection shifted. Now the mist version of yourself sat holding a small book in their lap. They opened it, and with each page turned, a rain cloud formed overhead, letting fall a soft drizzle that did not reach the ground. Each drop disappeared just before touching the floor, leaving behind a soft shimmer in the air. You stood in silence for a while, simply watching, then turned as another staircase revealed itself, this one climbing upward in a spiral of blue stone, the edges dusted with soft moss. As you climbed, the air changed. It grew lighter, tinged with the scent of lavender and old ink. Birds you couldn't see sang songs without words, and somewhere nearby a fountain burbled a tune that felt like it belonged to a memory you hadn't lived yet. At the top of the staircase was a room filled with feathers. They floated in midair, suspended by a breeze that never blew. Each one had a name inscribed on its spine in shimmering silver. When you touched one, it turned into a small letter, folded neatly and sealed with a raindrop-shaped wax stamp. You opened one. Inside, in gentle script, were words meant only for you. Words you had forgotten, but needed to hear. They reminded you of who you were when you were kindest. When you were still. When the world felt soft. Tears formed in your eyes, not from sadness but from the strange comfort of being remembered by something larger than yourself. You placed the letter back, and the feather reformed, drifting slowly back into the air. You wandered that room for a long time, letting the feathers swirl around you in quiet spirals, each one whispering something small and beautiful. Eventually, a single feather settled on your shoulder. It was warm and light and felt like being held by an old friend. When you looked again, the door had returned, not the driftwood one you first entered, but a new one, this time made of woven branches and strands of rain caught in mid-fall. It opened as you neared, and beyond it was a garden glowing with moonlight, even though no moon was visible in the sky. The garden was vast, yet enclosed by something unseen, like the feeling of being inside a memory you never wanted to end. The ground was soft beneath your feet, blanketed with moss that shimmered faintly in hues of indigo and pearl. Flowers bloomed in complete silence, their petals shaped like teardrops and clouds, and they opened not with the sun, but with your breath. Each time you exhaled, something new blossomed, a silver lily with petals that curled inward, a translucent blue fern that sang quietly as it swayed, a bloom so pale it seemed made of fog. Lanterns hung from branches, but there were no trees. They floated where trees might have grown, each one casting a gentle pool of golden light that flickered in time with your heartbeat. You wandered slowly, each step light as a drifting thought, until you came upon a bench carved from old stone and wrapped in ivy that pulsed faintly with warmth. Sitting there was a figure made of rainfall. Their shape was loose and fluid, constantly shifting, but never losing its sense of presence. When they looked at you, you felt no fear. Only the weightless pull of being fully seen. "This place remembers you," they said, though their voice was more sensation than sound. "Even when you forget yourself." You sat beside them, the bench warming to your presence. The figure reached out and handed you a small orb, clear, round, and soft as a raindrop. Inside it swirled an entire landscape, tiny and alive. A field of wildflowers beneath a pale blue sky, a single path winding gently through it, a tiny version of you walking slowly with bare feet and closed eyes. You held the orb carefully in both hands, watching the tiny version of yourself pause to look at the sky. The rain inside the orb began to fall upward. The figure beside you nodded once. You are made of all the things you thought you'd forgotten. Then they faded, slowly and peacefully, like mist returning to the sky. You sat for a long time, orb in hand, as the garden continued to bloom with every breath you released. Eventually, you noticed a soft melody in the air, distant, steady, like a lullaby being hummed just out of reach. You followed it. The garden led you onward, its shape shifting subtly around your steps. You passed through arches made of woven dreams, under vines that whispered poetry in languages you didn't know but somehow understood. You crossed a small stream made entirely of moonlight, its surface holding reflections that weren't your own, but belonged to people you loved. One smiled at you and waved gently before fading back into the ripples. On the far side, a gate waited. It was made of woven parchment and ink, framed with droplets caught in stillness. It opened inward, leading you into a round chamber lined with more of the softly glowing jars you'd seen before, each filled with rain. This time, however, they weren't labeled with names or places. They were labeled with feelings. One jar held the warmth before a hug, another the moment before sleep. Some were more complex, the ache of a forgotten melody, the peace of watching snowfall alone, the stillness after being forgiven. You ran your fingers along them gently, each one vibrating with something deep and familiar. Then, in the center of the room, you saw it, a jar labeled with your own name. You approached it slowly. Inside was a soft, golden drizzle, moving slowly in swirls. It shimmered with something more than memory. You lifted it carefully, and as you did, it glowed warmer, responding to your touch like a heartbeat. You could feel the comfort of all your quietest moments held gently within, the times no one saw, but that still shaped who you are. You held it close, and for a moment, nothing moved. Even the air stilled, as if the library itself was taking a long, slow breath with you. The jar in your hands pulsed gently with light, and as you cradled it close, a feeling spread through your chest, soft and warm, like the hush of blankets being drawn over tired shoulders. You weren't sure how long you stood there, only that the air around you held the stillness of a held breath, the kind that lingers just before sleep. Then, as gently as it had formed, the jar dissolved into a fine mist that curled into your skin, not vanishing but becoming part of you again. A light touch brushed your shoulder, not fingers, but the sensation of being nudged by a memory too kind to demand attention. You turned and found yourself standing not in the chamber of jars, but at the entrance to a vast hall, its ceiling lost in a canopy of slow-turning clouds. Columns lined the space, and between them hung soft, glowing veils of rainfall. Each veil shimmered with faint colors that shifted as you passed, pale green for comfort, soft violet for nostalgia, warm amber for belonging. The floor beneath your feet reflected them all like a still pond, and your footsteps made no sound. At the far end of the hall stood a desk made of stone and wood and something that looked like frozen dusk. Behind it sat an old woman whose eyes glowed faintly like lanterns. Her presence felt as old as the first rainfall. She looked up as you approached, her gaze steady and kind. "Have you found what you came for?" she asked. You weren't sure how to answer, but she nodded anyway, as if she already understood. Most don't come here knowing what they seek. They come because they've left something behind. And they stay until they realize it was never truly lost. She extended her hand, and in it was a ribbon, simple, silver, and soft as wind. "Tie this around your memory," she said gently. "It will know which one." You took the ribbon and held it for a moment before lifting it to your temple, and somehow, your hand knew exactly where to place it. When the ribbon touched your skin, the world around you flickered once, like a candle wavering in a draft. Suddenly you remembered something, not a moment, but a feeling. The quiet joy of being fully yourself, without needing to be anything else. A memory of belonging that had never had a name. The woman smiled. "There it is," she said. "Your library will keep it now." You looked behind her and saw shelves unfolding, not outward but inward, curling in slow spirals that led deep into hidden spaces. One of those shelves now held a new jar, one you hadn't placed, but knew belonged to you. Inside, soft golden rain drifted downward, then upward again, caught in an endless loop of remembering and release. The old woman nodded once more and gestured toward a doorway that had appeared beside the desk. "It's time," she said. You stepped through the doorway without hesitation, trusting the quiet invitation. On the other side was a bridge of glass suspended in air. It stretched across a vast chasm of clouds, lit from below by the soft flicker of dreamlight. As you walked, the bridge rang gently beneath your steps, like chimes heard through water. Below, shapes moved in the mist. Not people, not quite creatures, but feelings given form. You passed one that looked like a sleeping fox made of fog, and another that resembled a violin resting on a bed of petals. Each one pulsed softly with memory, yet none asked anything of you. They were simply there, drifting. The bridge narrowed until you stepped onto a round platform suspended in the center of the air. There, waiting, was a single door, simple, wooden, and glowing faintly with a light you recognized but couldn't name. The handle was cool to the touch, and as you turned it, the door opened not into another room, but into a soft breeze. You stepped through,